Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee, Wednesday, 4th of September at the Allendale Centre, Wimborne. It is one of the three area-based planning committees of Dorset Council. I better turn my microphone on. For the benefit of the public, my name is Councillor David Took, and I'm chair of this area planning committee. To my right is Councillor Duncan Sowery-House, who is the vice chairman. Our officers attending today are Bill Crowther, senior lawyer, Kim Cowell, as the area development manager, Liz Adams, who will be an Eastern team leader, who will be doing the presenting today on behalf of the officers' written reports, and Josh Kennedy from Democratic Services, and also our committee clerk, Megan Rochester from Democratic Services. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's meeting, especially members of the public who are here to listen to the debate, to hear what we say and the decisions being taken. And they have the opportunity to address the committee in accordance with our procedures. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed, and a copy of the recording of the meeting will be available on the website after the meeting. And by attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Please can I ask that all those in the room ensure their mobile phones are switched off or turned to silent. I'd like to refer everyone's attention to our public participation protocol. This is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting, and only those who have registered to speak will be allowed to address the committee. The first three members of the public, including any community or amenity group who have registered to speak for and against the application, including the applicant or their representative, will be invited to address the committee. If the applicant or their representative registers to speak, then only the first two members of the public wish to speak for the application may address the committee. MPs need to register in the same way and will count as one of the 6 speakers. Town and parish councils and ward members of Dorset Council who are not members of the committee and who wish to address the committee will be allowed to speak, provided they have given due notice. All requests have to be registered with our Democratic Services Support Officer by 8:30 AM on Monday, 2nd of September. When invited to speak, please take your place at the desk marked public speakers and speak clearly into the microphone so that your remarks can be heard on the live webcast, and return to your seat when finished. Each speaker will be strictly limited to 3 minutes. And the Vice Chairman will indicate when you have 30 seconds left. Once we have heard from all of the public speakers, I will close the public part of the meeting. No further interventions will be allowed. Furthermore, I would politely ask members of the public not to approach members of the committee during any short adjournments, during which a planning application consideration is undergoing, as that could affect the lawfulness of the committee decision. If we move on to the first item on the agenda, have we had any apologies for absence?
No, we've not received any apologies for absence.
Okay, thank you. I note Councillor Hobbs-Chell is not in her seat. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary or other conflicts of interest, bias or predetermination? Can I ask if members wish to make any declarations of interest? Take silence as none. Should something come up during the meeting which you think you should declare, please let me know straight away. Moving on to the minutes, you've all seen the minutes. Can I have someone who will propose these, or any comments on the meeting? Councillor Brenton, propose. Any seconder? Councillor Morgan. Take a vote. All those in favour, raise a hand. Take it, that's unanimous. Public participation. If you wish to make a comment at this point, you can do now, or you can elect to wait until the agenda item comes around. Does anyone wish to speak now, or are they all waiting? Okay. We've 3 planning applications which will be considered in turn. Has there been any requests for deferral or withdrawal?
Chairman, there have been no requests for deferral or withdrawal.
Thank you. So background information relating to the applications before us is being available for inspection by members prior to the meeting, covering consultations, objections and representations, as well as the Purbeck local plan and the council's related policies. So we'll take each application in turn. I use the following procedure. For each application, I'll invite the case officer to present their report and recommendations. After that, I will invite members of the public, planning agents, applicants and town and parish councils who have registered to speak to address the committee. When I call your name, please come to the small table as indicated. Speak clearly into the microphone, which you turn on by pressing the button, which got a picture of somebody speaking, surprisingly enough. And then following the public participation, I'll ask if officers if there are any salient points they wish to clarify. I'll then open up members of the committee for questions, clarification, and then debate. In order of the meeting, I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through the chair. I'll invite members to speak in turn. The vice chairman will keep a careful note of who's wishing to speak in the sequence. Proposals must be seconded before being debated or voted on. Any amendments proposed and seconded will be debated and voted on before the substantive motion. And if successful, we'll update the substantive motion. Please keep Teams microphones on mute if you're following us on Teams as well. Use the desk microphone supplied and ensure you talk directly into the microphone. Please state your name when you speak. At the end of the debate, I'll take a vote by show of hands, and the voting detail will be recorded in the minutes if 3 or more members request that this be done. Due to the technology, there may be a short gap once the presentations are loaded, and Ms. Adams adjusts what's on her screen and how she can say it all out. We'll take comfort breaks as and when needed, and I'm going to hand over now to Liz, who will introduce us to the next or the first planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. The first of the 3 applications before you today is an application in Studland for 3 dwellings on the Glebe estate. A reminder of the location, and this private estate comprises approximately 40 dwellings, mostly developed since the Second World War, and this is a view looking south towards the escarpment from the northern part of Studland village. Just to provide context, sorry. The application site is located on the northern edge of the estate. It currently comprises 2 residential plots. And this is a sensitive location within the designated Dorset National Landscape and the Purbeck Heritage Coast, where you'll be aware that local planning authorities are to seek to further the purposes of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty. As you can see, the land lies within the settlement boundary shown in black here. And so the principle of high quality, small scale development is acceptable, subject to the criteria identified in policy V1 of the Purbeck local plan. The officer report sets out why officers consider that these and other policy requirements have been met. I can update you since the last committee meeting, guidance on how the council is going to approach nutrient neutrality in respect of development affecting Poole Harbour Special Protection Area has now progressed. Since the Liscombe Farm credit scheme is now up and running, mitigation is available to overcome issues that have held up a lot of applications concerning the increase in nitrates associated with new net increase in residential properties. It's now been possible on the basis of that mitigation being available to positively include habitats regulations, appropriate assessment, and identify that we can progress to determination subject to a pre-commencement condition, which would require the applicant to provide proof that they have secured the credits or alternative mitigation. So the objections to the proposal for 3 dwellings are set out in your agenda at pages 23 and 24. Dudley Parish Council has objected to the proposals that they consider to be overdevelopment, causing adverse impacts to the national landscape and heritage site. They've also raised concerns about the ability of local infrastructure to support the development. The concerns about overdevelopment are shared by the former ward member, Councillor Brooks, and 16 objectors. There was 1 submission in support of the development. So the 2 existing dwellings on the site positioned to the south of their plots. They have relatively open and sloping front gardens. Litchin Haven, seen here, is a low-key dwelling linked to Almondbury. And here you see it in the context of the neighbouring property. Blue Waters. So this one's a more substantial hip roof bungalow. It's got a garage to the rear. This is the back of the garage seen here, and you can see the development across the other side of the road beyond it. The landscape and visual impact assessment accompanying the application explains there's a 7-metre difference between the front of the plot and the back in terms of height. So the land levels have been regraded over the years, and officers agree with the conclusions of the LVIA, the landscape and visual impact assessment, that the site has, because it's within the settlement and in its context, it has no particular merit in terms of its quality, and its contribution to the Glebe estate quite limited in terms of positive impact on the wider landscape. This is just to show you the 2 houses that you've just seen here, Blue Waters here, and the purple is outlined the previous consents granted in the 1990s. But I think, was to demonstrate opportunities that previously been identified for expansion, but they're not relevant to today's proposal. Now, the applicants requested pre-application advice prior to the submission of the application, and officers judged that the proposal was likely to accord with planning policies, subject to some amendments. So I've just shown you here to give you an idea that of the way that the proposal has adapted since that original pre-application submission, and there were discussions and amended plans involved. So this is the current proposal here. So the opposite report explains that there is a net increase of 1 dwelling, sort of in effect it's plot 3, and therefore an affordable housing contribution has not been identified as necessary to accord with policy H11. That's in the report. A clarification has since been provided by the council's legal team that policy H11 is worded such that it applies to all proposals for more than 2 dwellings. So new dwellings can't be interpreted as a net increase, but rather all dwellings. So for this reason, the recommendation before you this morning has been altered so that the approval is subject to a requirement for 20% affordable housing. This is the brownfield site outside of any of the areas that are exempt from providing affordable housing, unless the applicants demonstrate the provision of a contribution would not be viable, which is another provision within policy H11. So I will come to that at the end, but just to warn you, that's why the recommendation has been updated. Policy H14 in respect of second homes is more explicit, that it only applies to new, not replacement dwellings, and that they should be subject to occupation control so that they're not used as second homes. So that is illustrated in the condition number 14, which is proposed to retain control of future occupancy of unit 3, which is the plot down here. So as I mentioned, the topography is quite sloping, and it's intended to use that topography to achieve 3 three-storey dwellings. This is the floor plans for plots 1 and 2. As you can see, they have generous accommodation, including 4 bedrooms, integral garage, and a pool. The main living area is at 2nd floor to make use of the views. So the design of dwellings 1 and 2 remains similar to those submitted for pre-application consideration. Officers were satisfied that these could work in their context. Within the Glebe estate, there was a mix of the older, sort of more traditional dwellings and more recent contemporary design. So the dwellings will be started approximately 7 metres forward of this dwelling, 7 metres forward of Blue Ridge as currently exists. So it would maintain a 7 metre deep setback and this open corner that we currently see here. And the dwelling is to be cut into the hillside to achieve the increased floor space without significant height increases. Dwelling 1 has a flat roof, and the proposed material you can see here are Purbeck stone and then timber cladding. You've got a bit of grey cladding to provide interest, and then to the rear they're using composite cladding and so on. At pre-application stage, the applicants were advised of the need to try and avoid glare and light spillage. So they've responded by proposing anti-reflective glass and also overhangs and sliding screens to try to reduce visible light transmission during hours of darkness. Belatedly, I realised we hadn't put on a condition suggesting control of external lighting. So that is another proposed additional condition on top of those already in your agenda. This is a side section for plot 1. It shows how the development uses the site's topography. You can see here how the pool is sunk in. The proposed remodelling of the land is supported by a ground investigation report. Council's coastal risk management engineer is satisfied that the works are viable, and that condition, which is number 5 in your agenda, can secure additional specialist information which is needed prior to commencement of the groundworks to make sure that development is acceptable in respect of ground stability. On these side elevations, you can also see the obscure glaze screening at the 1st and 2nd floor level for the balconies and there's some battles here reducing light spill. Plot 2 is very similar but has a hipped roof. That makes it taller, but the intention is to respond to the design of dwellings further to the east and the west, which have a similar roof form. And again, we have the side elevations. Unit 3 is a 3-bedroom dwelling. It has a standing seam ply roof with cedar roof section. Again, just to respond that there's a pool again in this property, and the sustainability statement that accompanies the application identifies that ground source heat pumps can be installed and passive house principles used to ensure high thermal efficiency. Solar panels had originally been envisaged for plot 3, but these had the potential to be overbearing for neighbouring outlook. So at pre-app it was advised that alternative opportunities be looked into. So and the ground source heat pumps appear to be quick use. This is the front elevation facing the street. It's relatively modest with timber cladding here. Purbeck stone at the ground level, greater extent to the side. Composite cladding to the side and the rear as on plots 1 and 2. This is the northern elevation, and at stage officers had been concerned that this element was a lot larger, and we felt that that was going to be an issue. So with the reductions in the size, officers are now satisfied it was not clear intrusive, and the street being get into the plot. You can see here that step back behind plot 1. And it's now an acceptable height in relation to driftwood to the south, which I'll show you in a minute. You'll have noticed that in the design there are a few opportunities for overlooking between the dwellings because each of them has quite a plain rear. There's also an obscure glazed balcony screen here to ensure they're overlooking the south. One of the concerns raised by objectors has been about the height of the properties. Obviously on the hillside, has quite a big implication. As you can see in photo 4, the house stepped down, so we've got Driftwood here and the garage at Blue Water and then Blue Water here. Although views are not a relevant planning consideration, it is appropriate to consider outlook. And the applicants have provided us with some sections to help us understand how the houses interrelate. So while views from the ground floor of Driftwood would be impacted, the outlook is considered to be, this is considered to be an acceptable gap of about 13 metres, which is very similar to the gaps between the neighbouring dwellings previously approved on that site. The height of plot 3 will ensure that views continue to be, that Driftwood continues to benefit from views at the first floor level. This is an illustrative section or street scene rather, showing how the plots are related to one another. Again, we have Driftwood here. Please ignore the blue because that was previous development that didn't come forward. Sorry, that's Driftwood. I'm getting overexcited here. Sorry, this one's Driftwood, and then you're going up the hill here. This is our plot 3 and our plot 1. There, in this section, obviously proposed plot 1 is shown screened by planting, which isn't currently in existence. There is a landscaping plan which proposes the planting of hedges around these boundaries that could provide screening in a similar manner to the screening that you see here around Seahorse to the west. And there's some tree planting proposed, subject to advice from the council's tree team, which is the potential to soften visual impacts in the longer distance. So this is, again, sort of illustrative compilation of plans and what we know has been previously granted and is in existence. So while plots 1 and 2 are larger than other properties along the northern part of the settlement, this illustrative compilation supports the officer's view that the dwellings can be achieved without harm to the character and appearance of the Glebe estate and the wider Dorset national landscape within which it's viewed. That's set out in the officer's report. It shows the proposal is in accordance with the development plan as a whole, subject to the conditions set out at pages 14 to 44, and the additional condition that I just mentioned about external lighting, which I've popped here on this slide. As I mentioned, due to the need to secure affordable housing to comply with policy 811, the recommendation is now subject to the securing of a committed sum for 20% affordable housing via a legal agreement, or the applicant's demonstrating viability justification to record with policy 811. Now, if this isn't forthcoming in 6 months or a longer period, as agreed by the head of planning, then the recommendation is to refuse. The 6-month period is to try and take account of the need for independent viability testing, if that was proposed, and legal agreements can take a little while. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams. We have public speaker on this one, which is Alan Davis. We have a public speaker on this matter, which is Alan Davis, who is the applicant or the agent. I'm not sure which. Alan. If, unlike me, you can remember to put your microphone on.
Okay.
Speak directly into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman and Committee. Sorry.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application for Blue Water and Leichenhaven. As you've heard, this application seeks permission to demolish the existing properties and erect 3 replacement properties, resulting in a net gain of 1 property. The applicants are, of course, pleased to see your officers have recommended the application for approval, and I trust you are able to support the recommendation. Leichenhaven, one of the properties proposed to be demolished, is a linked detached dwelling of little architectural merit and needs significant work to bring the property up to modern day living standards. The building does not make the best use of this site and is at odds with the layout of the existing dwellings on the estate. It actually detracts from the existing built form of the remainder of the dwellings on the Glebe estate, as you see in the photographs. Blue Haven is a detached dwelling which gained planning permission in 1990 to demolish it and replace it with a split level dwelling, and permission was renewed again in February 1996. The proposal is to remove both dwellings and take the opportunity to rationalise the combined plots. This allows replacement with 3 carefully and sensitively designed dwellings, making the best use of the combined site area. The site is located within a defined settlement boundary, so as such, should be no objection in principle to replacing the existing dwellings and to take the opportunity to reorganise the plot layouts. The scheme arranges the development sensitively on the site, allowing for adequate separation between built forms, such that it will appear to sit comfortably within the area, mindful of the need to protect the amenity of surrounding neighbours. The local area is not constrained by any heritage designations and displays a mixture of architectural styles. The proposal has purposely taken its cue from more modern redevelopment schemes approved on the estate over the years. However, these 3 dwellings have been individually designed by local architects so that a pleasant visual variety and mix will exist. The properties have individual amenity spaces and adequate parking. Materials of construction are of a high quality, incorporating perfect stone, render, timber cladding, composite cladding, and grey aluminium windows. These textures and colours combine to give a robust quality finish. The proposals have been designed so they sit comfortably in line with the way the land slopes down from south to north on the wider hillside, as the illustrations demonstrate. So to summarise, the proposed development would fully respect local character by appearing as 3 distinct detached properties set in plots of adequate size and whose separation from neighbouring properties and differing site levels would mean the development will sit comfortably in the immediate and wider area. I trust you are able to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We don't have any further public speakers on this. So I'll throw it open to members of the committee to ask for any clarification. Or I'll throw it open to members of the committee. Ask any questions? Thank you. Bill, Councillor Schreiter.
Thank you, Chairman. Bill Schreiter, Swanage. In her, what I consider wise precautionary remarks, the former member for Stadland, that was Councillor Cherry Brooks, referred to overdevelopment, drainage too close to Poole Harbour, and that affordable housing was needed here, not dwellings of this kind. She then made the 4th objection was, and I quote, the threat of creep from sandbanks into the AONB. Can officers explain to me exactly what is meant by that? Because I can't quite figure it out. The threat of creep from sandbanks into the AONB. Can one of the officers or somebody enlighten me on that one?
That was a comment by
Councillor Cherry Brooks,
okay,
which appears in the papers relating to the application.
I suspect Councillor Brooks is the best person placed to answer that question, but
I'm sure she is. I just wonder, we are in the here and now.
Peter, my interpretation of what was said was concern potentially about design, I think, because there is certainly no expansion out of the settlement.
Right.
It's in existing settlement.
I just wondered whether other people had wondered what this meant as well. My question, Chairman.
okay, thank you. So Councillor Flower.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted to tease out from the officers a question around the liability and the 20%. Some of the experiences we've had in recent years, planning applications get approved. Then down the track, along comes a spreadsheet that justifies that it's not viable anymore. They have to make a contribution to affordable housing, and that goes through. I'm nervous about that, and I can't see why at this point we can't tease out from the applicant, who should know whether the thing is viable with the 20% levy charged to off-site provision. And I just wondered why that isn't before us this morning as part of something enshrined in the permission that we're being asked to agree with this morning, one way or the other. Do you have some clarification on that, please?
Councillor Flower, before I ask Liz to comment on that, I'd just add to that with my own related queries. I understood somewhere in the Purbeck local plan that we're talking about viability being established essentially by putting in the application. Is that a misreading on my part?
Okay, 2 questions there. Thank you, Jack. So the first question to answer Councillor Flower, this application came in quite some time ago, and it has been waiting for nutrient neutrality to be amended, or for a solution to nutrient neutrality. When the application came in, I need to double check this, but my understanding is we were still working under the old Purbeck local plan. And yeah, so there were 2 things there. One was at that time, we weren't able to actually ask for affordable housing because it was fewer than 10 dwellings. And the second thing was that Purbeck, the previous policy, AH, was referred to net increase in dwellings. So the application wouldn't have been triggered for affordable housing proposals. And then during the assessment of this application, officers have taken the view that new development meant net, but we've now had the late correction that new development means all new development. So the applicants haven't had the opportunity to confirm that they are able to provide the affordable housing contribution, or that they wish to go down the viability route. They were notified last night, but they haven't had the opportunity to give the information. So the application comes before you because that is something that can be remedied relatively easily through the legal agreement to secure the monies. That's straightforward. But because policy 811 includes the provision that where an applicant considers that there are significant economic viability constraints that would prevent the provision of affordable housing in accordance with the policy, they need to provide full justification of the particular circumstances, and a viability assessment should refer back to the viability assessment that informed the plan, providing evidence of what's changed since then. Now, the viability evidence that informed this plan, so coming to Councillor Took's point, dated 2018. That's my understanding. There has been some time since then. So it may be that the applicants would wish to look at the viability and consider whether things have changed and make a case. So, so for the purpose of this application, that is why, let's go back to the slide that explains the recommendation again. That's why we concluded that they can either sign up for the monies or make the full justification. The second sort of part of your question, I understand, was about how they can then come back in a few months later and suggest that actually it's unviable. So that would obviously be a new application, and all new applications would have to be considered on their merits in accordance with the information that's provided to support them. If viability information came through, then the council would rely upon independent viability assessment from the district valuer normally, and we would take into account any evidence that the applicant provides about how they consider that the baseline provided by the viability report that underpins the local plan has changed.
Thank you.
Councillor Rosard. Yeah, trying to blind us with science with all of this has made it more complicated. Actually, that doesn't clarify it for me at all. I mean, if you've got a developer that is not actually conforming to what the rules are now and the new regulations, then how are you going to actually do this with this application when you said it doesn't apply, but you're expecting them to come back and say, you know, where they will mitigate it. So I'm still a bit in the dark about that. I was told, I did inquire, that when conditions are put on and then they come back and say they're not viable, going back to Councillor Flowers' question about them coming back, and then it just going through a planning officer to say, yes, we understand that you're not viable now, so we can let that go by, change it under the, you know, under actually anyone actually making the decision through the planning service or through the planning portal or whatever you want to call it, through the proper planning area, so that we actually as a committee do not get to see that. It's done actually with the planning officers. So that actually is quite irksome. I was on the committee a few years ago when something like this happened in Swanage, and the builder was saying, yes, it's viable, we can do this. And then a few months later, or a couple of years later, they were clearing the site and come back and said, oh, no, we can't do this. We're going to reduce and with affordable housing in this particular case, no, we can't provide that, we'll provide this. And it was accepted. It didn't come back to anybody, and the local members didn't even get to see it, but it was accepted from that premise that the planning officer or whoever made the decision, and it wasn't in the public domain. So that is something that needs to be cleared up and actually clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Azad. Do you have any responses? Yeah, I think Mr. Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. So I can respond to I think Councillor Azad's concerns about applications coming back with a changed viability view and being dealt with by officers without scrutiny by members. The officer scheme of delegation provides that officers can only make in circumstances where members have made the original decision on an application, officers can only consider a application to change the planning obligations if there's no material reduction in benefit to the community. So if I can't comment on what's happened in the past, and I don't know the application that you're talking about, but now, if there was an application to reduce the amount of affordable housing based on viability, and you as a committee had made the original decision, that would come back before you it would have to come back under the scheme of delegation.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brenton was next, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. Alex Brenton, Litchett and Upton ward. Although I'm Litchett and Upton ward, I know this area fairly well, being a regular swimmer at Studland. There's a couple of questions that I've got, which is probably just me getting a bit confused, so bear with me. This element of linking with Aldbury, you said it was a linked bungalow, but at the same time it appears to be a separate bungalow. So what is the link and how would that affect the next door existing neighbour? That was one question. The other question is, there are pools, but on the plan it seems to be the same size as a car. So it's sort of like, of what virtue is a swimming pool that's only about the length of a car? It seems a little bit odd. So just a little bit more detail on that would be quite nice. And could we also go back to, I think it was probably about one of the early slides, which is the view basically from the main road looking across to the Glebe estate. I think that would help us, because the whole business, that one. So could you actually point out on the bottom picture which corner we are talking about? Is it the one against the road at the far end, or is it the one sort of at this top corner? So it is not next to the road, really.
Can you see?
Through you, Chair. So it's very unhelpful because there is a bit of tree in the way.
Okay, so it is one of the ones.
It's in this middle portion.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, it is the long view that you tend to get of this estate. And so if it was like a pimple on the far corner, everybody would notice it and we would get in months to come, a lot of complaints about disturbing the long view. Okay, that was my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Brenton. I think, yeah, I thought you'd sort of answered as you were going along, but.
Through you, Chair. So there was a question about the link with Almondbury. My understanding is that it's part of the side, part of the flank wall, but I'm afraid I don't have full details. The applicant would need to go through the Party Wall Act requirements of legislation to ensure that they've got permission from the neighbour.
We don't have a clear picture. Where's the link?
Sorry, so can you see down here? This is the link. So here's Almondbury, and this is Litcham Haven here. But you can see here it's sort of slightly lower. So there's a link, but it's not that easy to pinpoint. The question about the pool. I'm just going to go to the pools. Here we are. Yeah, so I think there's limited information, isn't there? This pool, it could be a plunge pool. It potentially could be a hydrotherapy pool. It could be one of those ones that has a current and something against it. I don't have the details here.
No windows.
So that one is
Basement.
basement. Yeah. Yeah, no windows.
That satisfy you, Councillor Brenton?
It intrigues me.
Okay, I've got Councillor Andy Skeets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Andy Skeets from Westmoors and Three-Legged Cross. You've answered a couple of my questions that I had in preparation anyway, by virtue of the work that you've done. So I can see that the officers have had a really good look at this and have done a good job, I think, generally. The one thing that I note, though, is that this site is obviously going to be a bit more close and intensive, and the impacts to neighbouring properties, although you've reported them as not so significant, they are obviously some. What concerns me is what might happen in the future, which we can't tell, and also some of the smaller buildings that seem to have disappeared from a pre-application of other ideas for use on that site. So it comes to mind to me that potentially, if we do not remove the permitted development rights for this site, for these three buildings, that things could change in the future. And although I'm mindful to take on board what Spencer Flower has said, because many times in my history, we've seen developers wiggle out of affordable housing payments by very astute and clever lawyers that seem to represent them, and tend to get their way sometimes. So I sincerely hope that doesn't happen, and it sounds like you're on it. But could we remove the permitted development rights if we were a mind to accept the application, to make sure that the future doesn't get worse, if you like, for neighbouring properties and the properties that we're allowing to be developed?
Thank you. Yes, if we can get an answer from that, that would be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. So paragraph 1629 of the report, the officer has written that we considered about restricting finished development And it was our opinion that due to the limitations, because it's within the area that's home attributing now national landscape, which has quite limited permitted development options. That's our thinking behind not removing them in this case. If there were particular concerns about what could be achieved with outbuildings, then that is an option open to members to do that. Roof extensions at the moment under the current permitted development rights aren't allowed on Article 2.3 land, which is where we're cited. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Andy, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I have to say my name again?
No.
The other thing that I forgot to mention, because I backed on a little bit, was that you looked at lighting outside, and there was, I think, hedging for screen height. Was there a limitation on the screening height of the hedging? Because the property at the top, I think it was called Driftwood, is affected by this development. And if somebody were of a mind to grow a really tall hedge, then obviously that could get in their way as well. So is there a height limitation on the hedging?
Yeah. So the hedging proposed, I'm going to get this wrong and I apologise for my pronunciation, is Griselinia littoralis, which is a fast-growing evergreen shrub. And might say it can grow quite high, but we have difficulties as planning officers in imposing constraints on the height of hedging because it's quite difficult to enforce. And therefore, the usual practice is to encourage applicants to be sensible. So there's a suggested involved in it, and there is a high hedge legislation should there be concerns in the future about the way that hedging is being looked after. But controlling the heights of hedging is not something that we've tended to try to do by plan.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Skates?
It answers my question, Mr. Chairman, but doesn't give me any confidence in the future. So I'm afraid I do believe in human nature, but sometimes human nature gets the better of people when it concerns things like heights of hedges and hedging disputes and those sort of disputes that we get in our communities all the time. Sometimes there isn't an answer to them, but on the new development, I'm surprised that you can't limit the hedging to 6 foot, like a traditional fence line height or something of that nature. Perhaps you could help me on that, because I'm mindful that, bearing in mind what Spencer has said and what I've said on the permitted development rights, we can do something there, and I'm happy to propose on that basis that we accept. But I'm concerned about the hedge height and its implications on driftwood.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I take that back to the officers, if they can answer it, my thoughts would be that, yes, we can look at fence heights. But I don't know if hedge height is a material planning consideration, but I will defer to the officers. I've seen no reason why it shouldn't be, but whether it is or not, I don't know.
I think just 2 comments from officers. One would be that planting and vegetation is not development, so you could plant something anywhere unless there's a condition that prevents from doing so, and that would not be development. So that usually because there is this separate legislation that covers high hedges and is intended to prevent or provide a way through dispute, not a matter that we would usually try to control through planning.
Ms. Helens. Councillor Brenton? Oh, sorry, Kim.
If I can just add to that, members should also, through your chair, clearly as well, due to the setting on the hillside and the retaining wall to be required, the hedge would have to grow very tall to impact a property that's at a higher level. And I think members need to actually focus on the cross section that's before you, rather than assuming that a hedge is going to obscure the view from the property, which is at higher ground. I could just add that before we get caught up on the height of the hedge in this instance. Thank you.
Ms. Carroll. Alex, will you? Sorry,
Thank you,
Councillor.
Chair. Have we moved on from questions now? Can we?
I think questions tend to merge
Okay.
almost inevitably into debate at some point, so we can move to that phase. Thank you.
I see you, Alex.
Councillor, do you wish to make a
I was going to make a general comment.
Yeah.
Slightly linked to what Councillor Tritus said about the idea that Sandbanks is leaking into Studland. And I can quite understand the concern of particularly residents, long-term residents of Studland, because the style of houses in Studland has changed dramatically in the last 15 years. The older properties are, if they're not knocked down and rebuilt, into a very modern style, a very Sandbanks, very millionaire's holiday style, even if they're not millionaire's houses. And that is a concern. That it used to be, you looked across at the Glebe estate and they were all seemed to be, hip roof, gable roofed bungalows and traditional shaped houses. And now we're beginning to get pointy shapes and flat roofs and big slabby bits. And we have the same situation happening in the main road of Studland as you come in. They may be very economical, they may be very eco houses, but they are a different style. So I can quite see that there would be local objections purely on the style. But having looked at the cross sections, having actually looked at some of the, all these retaining walls seem very heavy and blocky, but of course, because of the site, they're relevant. So I can understand that the local opposition to this, but actually on planning terms, I don't think there's much we can object to. And as an aside, speaking as a horticulturalist, Bristolinia littoralis rarely gets more than 3 meters tall. And we are in an area where there's salt spray all the time, which reduces the height. So that is the least of my issues. I would be much more concerned if they were talking about putting in thulias or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response to any of that? No. We've got Councillor Beresard, I think.
Thank you. Having a look at the parking arrangements, I noticed that one of the houses has got a double garage and the other two have got single garages and the basement area. Am I right? I can't quite see on some of these. And it means that the driveways, the way that houses are positioned, there is not much provision for extra houses in the driveways. And I think for 4-bedroom houses, you may have 2 or 3, cars only at one time. So you've shown now where the provision is. That's a double garage there. And then on that plot 1 and 2, the similar thing. And that's plot 3. It's got a double garage as well. So they've all got double garages. Is that right?
Yeah, just to confirm, they've all got double garages and they've all got parking off street as well. There is a proposed condition that to maintain those garages in perpetuity.
Right. So in fact, if there was any permitted development, they couldn't do it out the front in any case, or convert the garages into housing rooms. Is that right?
So just to confirm, through you, Chair, the permitted development rights would require a planning application to amend the garaging and projections forward of principal elevation on permitted
So
development.
they couldn't do that under permitted. Yeah, thank you very much. That clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flower.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Flower, Burwood Ward. just want to come back on my point about viability, because I don't have a problem with the style, size, location. It's fine in my view. But I read the bullet points around the reasons why the officers have put forward the suggestion we should grant this application. But I know material considerations would warrant refusing the application. The track record of viability in the after event, after permission, is not good. And I can cite many occasions, and we touched on one in Swanage, where we had viability used as a reason for not putting any affordable housing into the site at all because of ground conditions that surprisingly changed during the course of the process. So I've got no, I'm sorry about this, and this is why I brought this up earlier. I have no faith that currently, with viability being a material planning consideration and the need for affordable housing in Dorset, I think the off-site provision is great because it's funds we can use, somebody can use to provide for the indigenous population of Dorset, where we have a desperate need for housing. I have a real concern about being asked to approve an application and wait for a spreadsheet to come along to say, oh dear, but maybe not. Maybe they'll come along and go, yeah, fine, we can take a 20% change to the viability and it's not a problem. But we're being asked this. It's a leap of faith, and that worries me considerably, Chairman. But I don't know if I can support this application for that reason this morning.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I may, if I could just clarify the proposal that's before you, the recommendation is to secure an agreement to secure policy compliant affordable housing. If the applicants want to run a viability exercise where they're not delivering a policy compliant affordable housing scheme, then because that just, Phil said earlier, represents a reduction in material benefit, then we would bring that back to the committee. If we don't get the legal agreement within 6 months, which delivers a policy compliant contribution, then the applicants demonstrate that the scheme is not policy compliant in terms of viability because they put the figures before us and then bring that back to you. So the officers wouldn't be making a decision, we're just asking for them to just by means of calculation. So it's not one thing and another, it's that's the recommendation. Thank you.
I'll move to Tony, I think is next. Can I just clarify what you mean by a further application? Is that an application to look at the viability issue, or is it to revisit this application and potentially refuse it?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I may have confused members and other officers with what I said earlier. The Constitution says where there's a Section 106 obligation in place that was effectively imposed by committee, and there's an application where there'd been material benefit, then that would not be an officer delegated decision. It would have to come back. The amended recommendation before you today is either the applicant accepts the need to provide policy compliant affordable housing contribution, or they provide a viability assessment which demonstrates that they don't. In that latter case, the recommendation before you, that wouldn't come back to members, but you are able to propose a slightly amended recommendation if you wanted. So if you expressly wanted the matter to come back to you, if a viability assessment is provided which seeks to justify no affordable housing, you could require that as part of your decision today to come back. So you could have you could make a resolution to grant if a Section 106 obligation is provided within 6 months, and to refuse if it's not provided in 6 months. Plus, you could have a bit that said if the applicant wishes to submit a viability assessment, that must be provided within a certain time frame, and if that seeks to justify no affordable housing provision, that must be brought back before granted. So there's a range of options. The recommendation is what it is. You don't have to follow it, and there's a suggestion there that if you were minded in principle to grant, of a potential way forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a few people wanting to speak, but is somebody going to propose that we add that? I think I've had a signal from Councillor Flower.
I think
If you don't
technically
speak,
we've got.
Chairman, I was going to say for yourself.
I think strictly speaking, proposal from Councillor Skeets on the go. I think you need to ask if you wish to withdraw.
Okay. First of all, Councillor Skeets put a proposal through a little while ago, which may have been overtaken by events. That's not been seconded. So first of all, does anyone wish to second that? And then secondly, Councillor Coombs wanting to speak. And Councillor House wanting to speak. So first of all, do we have a seconder for Councillor Skeets' proposal? So that falls for the moment at least. So Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. In my view, the risk of a viability assessment is quite small because this is actually quite a small development. So the financial parameters around it will be much tighter, and therefore the applicant should have a lot more certainty than, for example, the one that was quoted earlier in Swanage. I think there were 7 affordable units in that application. So I don't consider that to be quite the cliff edge that perhaps we're making it out to be. So I'm quite happy to move grant as per the officer recommendation with 2 extras. One is the removal of PD rights, and the other is a resolution that if they do wish to challenge the viability, that it does automatically come back to people.
Thanks, Chair. Through you. Just a query for Councillor Coombs on that proposal. Just wondered if she could clarify which permitted development rights she's envisaging are removed.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Coombs.
So I'm just trying to find the paragraph again, with the full detail. So you've got windows on plot 3 now. You actually have, sorry, I'm not all the conditions in my head. Is that one that had already been done? I do take on the point about the national landscape provisions. It was about removal of windows in plot 3.
Do you, Chair? So, okay. Just
Thank you.
respond to Councillor Green. So, at the moment, condition 17 removes the right to add additional windows or other openings on the south elevation.
Thank you. Overlook that bit. I'm quite happy with that. So, I fully understand that because of the national landscape limitations that we can't do a blanket removal. So I will drop that from my
I don't see that.
my proposal. So as per officer recommendation, but if there's a viability challenge, then it must come back to committee.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Anybody want to second that proposal? Councillor Brenton. So do you want to speak now or?
No, I will not speak now. I bow to Tony Coombs being far better at finding the small print than me. So I am sure that her proposal is probably more valid than my rather waffly one would be.
You, Councillor Brenton. Councillor Flower, does that cover your concern?
In a word, no. I shall probably abstain on this item because I still have concerns about viability.
Okay, we've had a proposal that's been seconded. Could we just agree the precise wording of that proposal before we take a vote on it?
It's very straightforward, Chairman. It's as per the officer recommendation, which is what is being shown on the screen.
And in the event there is a challenge or viability, then that must come back to committee. It's that simple.
Does you? Okay, in that case, it's been, unless anyone's, Councillor Trice.
Could I just be clear, Chairman, please? If this amendment passes, we would still have to vote on what has then become the substantive. I am correct in that, aren't I? We are not then, if this passes, are we supporting the whole thing? Or are we just dealing with the amendment and then the amendment goes on to the original or it modifies the original and thereby becomes the substantive?
We only have one proposal on the table, which is therefore the substantive motion. That proposal is to approve as per that recommendation, plus the condition that it comes back to the committee if it's challenged on viability grounds. So that's one proposal. So that is the substantive motion.
Right, okay, because I wanted to just say a few words about the original proposal, but it would also apply to the amended substantive. But I want obviously to do that before we vote on what ultimately is the substantive.
In that case, Councillor Trice, please.
Okay, well. Right, well, I'd just like to get us back to one or two planning basics, if I may, rather than the more esoteric considerations of things like viability assessment and whatnot, because it seems to me that yet again, we are completely ignoring the views of the local parish council, the person who was then the local member, and the neighbours, who are the people at the sharp end of this application. And it irks me that their views are being completely ignored by this committee, as far as I can see. And those views, I think, are valid in my judgment. They include the overdevelopment of this plot. They include the out of character, large scale development of this proposal and the effect of it on the immediate area and indeed on the surrounding area. The contention, I think it's valid that visually this has an impact, an unwanted impact in a sensitive area of the AONB and the World Heritage Site. It was Councillor Brooks who also mentioned overdevelopment and the threat of sandbanks design creeping into this area, because that is my interpretation of the fourth objection of hers, which I found difficult to understand at first. And the other point that comes from local neighbours is that this is out of character with the area, in terms of scale, design and intent and density, it is unacceptable. 2 would be acceptable, 3 are not in their judgment. The scale of the development and the size also sets a precedent, particularly in relation to older houses in the immediate locality. And it seems to me that we're ignoring these somewhat more basic things, and I feel they are valid, and that consequently we ought to be seriously considering not agreeing to the original proposal. And as far as I can see, that would also apply to the substantive if it becomes amended in the way that Councillor Tony Coombs is suggesting. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can get a response to you from Abel.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear up where we are on proposals. There is only one proposal. There's no amended proposal on to debate. There's the officer recommendation. That is not a proposal in any form. It's just if you want, without wishing any disrespect to it, is a suggestion to members which sets out the officer's professional view on what they would recommend. It isn't a it isn't adopted in any way until you as members decide what you want to do with that recommendation. So Councillor Coombs has made a substantive proposal which has been seconded, and that at the moment is what you are voting on. There are no amendments to that currently on the table. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sally House.
Through you, Chair, I think it concerns me that Councillor Flower, I think, made shared some concerns with me with regards to viability, and I wonder if I could encourage him to express that as an amendment to the substantive motion so that he's able to vote.
Thank you. I think we'll defer to Councillor Flower.
Look, I'm going to go at it based on experience and past track records. I can be proven wrong, and I'm quite happy to be proven wrong. When we've had occasions when, regardless of the size of the site, when it comes to viability, a spreadsheet appears, it's supported by the district valuer. It puts us in a very difficult place as members to argue against the views of the district valuer. In my view, the sort of thing around viability, if it's going to be material, it should form part of the application that we're being asked to consider, as opposed to an event that takes place beyond the decision we might make this morning. That's my concern. And I think there's enough in what Councillor Coombs has said, and as has been said by legal, it will come back anyway. But the grounds on which we can offer to challenge the views of the district valuer on viability are not very strong. So, my view, the time to be dealing with viability is at the point of agreeing a planning application, and that is not what we're going to be doing this morning. So, I should remain. I won't be supporting this today. I'll probably be abstaining, but as I say, there's certain aspects of it I have no problem with at all. You know, but I have concerns about the viability part.
We'll go to Councillor Ezard again. I think Mr. Crowther would like to make a couple of points.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely understand Councillor Flower and other members' concerns about viability assessments being used post-decision to reduce affordable housing provision. Mr. Adams explained to you that the reason why on this application that information wasn't provided when the application was made, and very shorthand, it was a timing point about when the application was submitted and for various reasons, the changes that have happened since then. I would just add that the track record of other developers doing things is not a material consideration for this application on viability. So I would caution members against using that as a reason for their decision making today, whatever that might be.
I have to say I've sat in this room on a number of occasions where there have been viability assessments put before us, and we haven't had a great deal in the way of fighting them, and we've lost affordable housing on that basis. Sadly, however, I don't think that likelihood is a reason to reject as a planning consideration. However, Councillor Ezard.
Grounds that Councillor Flowers put forward, I would have thought that instead of having this coming back as a viability issue later, why don't we defer this application and then, you know, for it to actually include this viability clause, and then bring it back to the next, you know, planning committee. That I think that would clear it up, and then it would be done all in one go. That's my consideration of this. Thank you.
Councillor Ezard. Councillor Skeets, I think you can, and then we'll come to the officers if we can.
Skeets, Westmoors and Three-Legged Cross. I agree with the chair and I agree with Spencer Flower and Daryl's comments. So history tells us that if there's any wriggle room in development, it will be taken up, and it's usually taken up with force that we can't resist. So I've a mind either to abstain, as Spencer was suggesting, or in hope that we can come up with something, as Beryl suggested, that we deal with it now for the actual acceptance of planning.
Okay, thank you. Officers, you wish to make any comment?
From me, Chair, my understanding of the comments I've had is that the outcome would remain the same if members were minded to approve the proposal that's before them. Then that would give the applicant the opportunity to sign up to the legal agreement and secure a grant of permission, or to choose to come forward with a viability proposal, and we would come back to the committee, and the committee would then make a decision.
Thank you, Ms Adams. Any further comments or questions or matters for debate? Anybody? Councillor Trott.
Just one point, if I may, Chairman. I've heard no arguments to counter the basic objections which I've put forward and which were put forward by the local parish council, by the then member and by neighbours. Not one word to deny those objections.
Thank you. I think at the moment we've got a proposal that's been seconded. If we can just remind ourselves that that proposal is as per the recommendation on the screen, plus position to bring it back to committee, which we've discussed at some length. I think it's probably time to move to the vote. So can I ask all those who are in favour of the proposal as is on the table, please raise a hand. Six. I mean, that's six. All those against? None. And all those abstaining? 3, 4. So in that case, so the proposal is carried, and we will grant planning permission on this one. Yeah, it's P full 2023 00864 is therefore approved.
Subject.
Well, subject to the proposal.
Just before you move, my connection.
Yeah. Yeah, we can take a 5-minute comfort break now.
Thank you, Bill. But
In case people Good morning again. Hopefully we're ready to continue. We have the next item on the agenda is item number 7, PHOU 2023-06781, 11A Bestwall Road, Wareham, which should be presented by Liz Adams on behalf of Simon Burdett. And just on that, Councillor Edard, ward member, are you going to be speaking as a ward member or as a member of the committee?
I'll be speaking as a member of the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Good. So if you're ready, Miss Adams again on behalf of Simon Burdett.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is in the settlement of Wareham. The land to the north is in use as allotment, as you can see on the aerial photograph. And this is quite a narrow plot in between number 11 and number 15. The site lies in the settlement, as I've already said, shown by the black line here. And it is within the Dorset National Landscape, shown in this sort of orange colour. The green belt lies beyond, so the allotments are in the green belt. Proposal is to extend both to the side, here at the front, and to the rear of the property and enlarge the roof to create first floor accommodation. Pre-application advice was sought from the council prior to the submission of this application. The officer advice was that the bulk of the proposals should be reduced. One option was to reduce the proposed eaves height and the bulk of the east side dormer. Amendments to the front elevation to reduce the extent of glazing and soften the visual impact was also encouraged, and concerns were raised about the dormers with recommendations to reduce their width. The applicants were warned against any significant increase in their bulk, just out of concern for the impact on the street scene. It was recommended that a street scene plan would assist in understanding the relationship with neighbours. These are the proposals that are now before you. So I've shown here the existing bungalow, which you can see here has a asymmetrical response. And the applicants have responded to the pre-application advice by reducing the eaves height so that it's almost equivalent to the existing. And but in order to achieve the level of first floor accommodation that they've identified that is needed for their family, they've increased the depth of the dormers, which I'll show you in a second. Well, you can see it on the slide here. In the report, I've referenced an increase of ridge height of about 0.8. It's not the easiest to measure because of differing in land levels, but it's between 0.8 and 1, probably 1 metre increase is fair. This does not affect officers' judgment that the increase can be achieved without harm in the street scene overall. A fully enclosed rear balcony is proposed. The dormers look quite bulky on this elevation plan, but their impact would be reduced somewhat by the setback of approximately 5 metres from the front of the dwelling. And the majority of the new fenestration that you see here at ground floor level could be achieved under permitted development rights for works to the dwelling house. These couple of panes at the back are in the extension to the dwelling. Wareham Town Council has objected to the application in relation to design. They recognise that the asymmetric design of the existing property means there's already a contrast with the character of the streetscape. They're concerned that the additional bulk would represent overdevelopment. You just see here the context looking up and down the road. The house is just identified with a red arrow. The officers recognise that the proposal will increase the height and bulk of the dwelling, but the design of the existing building already accentuates its form in the street scene, and there are a variety of ridge heights. On balance, we consider that the symmetrical design with its modest first floor fenestration would have an acceptable impact and therefore appropriately integrate in its context. There's also the need to consider the impacts to the rear. The proposal will be viewed from neighbouring gardens and the allotments. The nearest public footpath is about 140 metres to the north, so the impact is going to be, I think you're going to see it in the context of the other neighbouring built form. Not considered that the changes would be particularly incongruous. Wareham Town Council also raised concerns about neighbouring amenity, and objections were received from adjoining neighbours. So the assessment of the impact is set out in your officer report. In relation to number 1, to the 11, sorry, to the west, which this is the back of it. You can see the front there. I would just draw your attention to the fact that these windows that you can see here are obscure glazed and they serve washrooms, ensuite baths and so on. It's proposed as part of the application before you to erect a higher boundary fence between the properties to provide screening. The report anticipates a condition to secure this, which was unfortunately missed off the list of conditions, but can be added as number 8. So I've added the slide in later. The rear of the dormer, so the dormer would be on this side here, would approximately align with the rear of elevation of number 11. And the ridge extension, as you can see here, is cut short to create the balcony, thereby avoiding an overbearing impact from the neighbouring garden. Number 15, to the other side, has 2 windows in the flank wall that already face number 11A, so offer limited outlook. The proposed dormer will be more evident for these neighbouring occupiers, as it would extend beyond the rear of their property. No harm that would justify refusal has been identified from an overbearing impact or overshadowing. This is due to the limited projection and because the open aspect is maintained for the remainder of the garden. Condition 4 is proposed to ensure that the rear window of the dormer is obscure glazed to avoid overlooking into the garden. So that'd be on this side here. And also, otherwise, there could be overlooking into the potential into the conservatory of that dwelling as well. Condition 6 would prevent future windows in the side ground floor extension here, which would be on the boundary with the neighbour. The obscure glazed balcony screen is also to be secured by condition 5 to avoid overlooking. So in relation to the balcony screen, officers requested the obscure glazed side screens, but the applicants proposed that the balcony is fully enclosed by obscure glazed screens for their own privacy. I would consider whether this would result in an oppressive living environment for future occupiers. I've judged that although it's suboptimal, the sky views above the balcony screen out through these translucent windows here would avoid a sense of being enclosed in a negative way. At the front of the property, it's proposed to replace this sloped driveway with 2 level parking spaces. So it's quite difficult to see, and I'm sorry about the quality, but just the way that the slide shows up. The existing stairs that you see here and in the photograph here are to be blocked off with a new retaining wall, just like here there. And this would allow the land levels to be raised, as you can see here, the red is the existing, up to in line with the pavement to allow 2 street level parking spaces. No harm to highway safety has been identified from these proposals. In summary, your officer's recommendation is an on balance one of approval, subject to the conditions set out in paragraph 18 of the committee report. And 2 extra conditions, for which I apologise, but these are the closable boundary fence that I already mentioned to provide screening for the ground floor windows, and also just the provision of those parking spaces in accordance with that plan that came in slightly later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. We have 1 public speaker registered on this, who is a member of the public as an objector, who is James Parent. Yeah. If you could take place at the desk, remember to turn the microphone on and off, and you'll have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. So Surrey House will give you a 30.
I'm James Parent. I have lived next door to 11A Westall Road for 14 years. Councillors, I do not accept the planning officer's report and its attempts to make an unacceptable development acceptable by increasing both its housing density and mass. In my view, the report's conclusion that the development is acceptable on balance subject to conditions simply ignores the congested reality of the site and understates the intrusive visual impact of the proposed 4 meters long two-storied extension that will be built virtually along my garden's west boundary. 11A sits on a uniquely narrow plot of land in Bessel Road. Its frontage is 9.7 metres wide, which narrows to 7.5 metres at its northern boundary, and is about 32 metres long. The planning officer's observation that the design of the existing house already represents a departure from the prevailing character of the development in the street scene identifies a historical planning error, which surely cannot be a justification to allow further, even more damaging development to take place. The proposed development, cramped between two bungalows with heightened mansard roof, would increase its rather incongruous profile as seen from the road. I therefore request the committee to reject the planning officer's recommendation to grant planning permission for the proposed development at 11 Bessel Road and refuse the application. Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. Farrant. Officers, you have a response?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. In that case, do we have any questions from members of the committee? Alex, Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brenton, Litchfield and Upton Ward. Although I do not live in Wareham, I go down Bessel Road. Over decades, I've been going up and down Bessel Road because we have a rugby club at the end. Although I have noticed over the years that various bungalows have gone up, several of them, particularly the far end, are now definitely two-storey, quite bulky buildings. And the other side of the road is mostly houses as opposed to bungalows. So if you are playing devil's advocate, you might say that this area is an anomaly. Could I ask because I need to ask the question, could I ask what proportion, the officer, how many bungalows are there in this line? And are there any other in this road that are this narrow?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I can't answer the question about how many bunkers there are in the road. I did walk up and down a few times, but I didn't count. In terms of the narrowness, I would say this is one of the narrower plots.
Thank you.
Can I come back just for clarification? How old is this property and the majority of the building along there?
I'm going to answer for you shortly, approximately.
Thank you, Chair. The bungalow construction was granted in July 1972, so it would have been within 5 years from that date.
Thank you. Councillor Izzard.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Izzard, Wareham Ward. This is in my ward, and I am aware of this property. I got down that road a lot, and I've lived in Wareham for 12 years and in the area for all my life. I did check that this bungalow on a very narrow plot, it is the narrowest plot along Best Road, and it was put in 1972, whereas all the adjoining buildings and properties were built in 1953. So it's good 20 years after. So you beg the question whether it was somebody's garden before or not. So it's already had extra development. And it does narrow down at the back, as the next door resident mentioned. And if this, I understand, is doubling the footprint of this bungalow into a chalet bungalow. And it's overlooking on both of those neighbours very, very closely. I mean, within half a metre up the back. And that is actually the building and not the boundary wall. And the boundary wall is very, very close. So I would actually, object to this and actually on the fact that it is overdevelopment of this particular bungalow and it spoils the street scene completely. And actually, it actually really makes the viability of it for their neighbours very uncomfortable indeed, because it just does, however much obscure windows you put in or how much you block the balcony with obscure windows, the actual sound and the actual contents of whatever goes on there will be so close to the neighbours as to be a very big nuisance for them. So I would object to that on those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Azard. There wasn't a particular question there, I don't think, rather a start of the debate. Do we have any questions from people before we move into debate? Councillor Morgan.
Councillor David Morgan, representing Wimborne. Balconies always concerned me, having been accosted in the street only on Saturday, because somebody next door to them had a balcony, and it's done in such a way that they have no privacy whatsoever. The people next door, they can be overlooked. In fact, they even wave to them from the balcony, which adds to their ire. This balcony is going to be enclosed, is it? I assume. Does that mean they can't see out if it's obscured glass?
Please.
Sorry.
I see that just the balcony screening is required and this should be secured. And you've got a condition in number 5.
Yeah, so the balcony screening is shown to be about 1.8 metres high, which would provide prevent. Which would prevent overlooking. That would be obscure glaze, and the intention is that would be secured by piece of paper by condition as you've identified.
And if I might add, there was from yeah, sorry about that. I think I have a loud enough voice, but it might not pick it up. And there's also a concern about noise from the bell from some third parties. I suppose there's nothing that can be done about noise if people are using the balcony. Is it a big enough balcony to have, parties on it, etc.?
It's got about 11 square metres, so you could have a table and some chairs, but it'd be quite a small party, I imagine. As you've said, it's a residential use already, so there's already potential for noise from the garden.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One question of my own. If we go back to the diagram that showed the street plan and where the green belt landscape. That's the one. Dorset National Landscape, those houses are included within the Dorset National Landscape, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else with any questions Councillor Ezard and then Councillor Brent.
I did ask a question in my comment there. I asked, was the footprint doubled or more than doubled on the original bungalow size?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the footprint isn't doubled, but the floor area, because they are extending the footprint and going up to the floor area. Yes, you could say that.
It's more than double.
Councillor Brenton.
I'm just looking, this building, the 1970s, building standards and housing regulations were different then. It does say in the support section that the dwelling needs repairs and modernisation. Now, most houses that were built in the 70s, let alone the 50s, didn't have much in the way of insulation or noise reduction or any of the things we would now expect in a modern property. Are there any details of, triple glazing, solar panels, anything that would make this house more sustainable for the future, bearing in mind it's not exactly a pretty building at the moment. So one could argue, I'm not sure if I am arguing, that it might be an improvement. So are there any details of any improvements to the actual structure, the livability, the sustainability of the building, which might justify?
Yeah. They're limited to the benefits that would be secured through the new building regulations.
Thank you. Come back.
No, if they follow, if because of this application has just recently come in, it follows the new housing regulations, then that has to be an improvement in the living quality of the house in terms of heating and insulation and also noise reduction.
Thank you. So I assume from that the new parts will be subject to new building regulations, but the existing parts are as they are.
Yes, but there's quite extensive change.
Yeah. Any further questions or comments, or anyone wish to start? Councillor Surrey House.
Okay, so this is debate, not a question. My view of this existing property is that it's not exactly iconic for the road. And whilst I don't live in Wareham, I have operated a business in Wareham for the last 25 years, and so I do know this location very well. I think whilst we were talking in previous applications about the need for affordable housing, something that in my ward in Corfmullen I'm very mindful of. We have the highest level of young families in the Dorset Council area. And with good schools in Wareham, there are many families trying to relocate to Wareham or bring up their families in Wareham. We have a number of roads in our ward where this actual style of development to a property is happening wholesale. People are finding it difficult to move into affordable homes that they can, and they're choosing to not pay stamp duty, stay at home and fix their home so that they can stay there. I think this, for me, improves the amenity of housing in the area. It will enable a family to live there in close proximity to schools. I don't like those sorts of dormer windows, if I'm honest. However, I think without raising the whole roof, I think it's good that they are set back 5 metres, that the applicant has done their best to keep the eave height consistent, and I appreciate that it may not be everybody's choice to live next to something that's developed like this, but I think in time the whole area will change, and I do support this application.
Thank you. Do we have thoughts from any other committee members? Councillor Skiggs.
Councillor Andy Skeets, Westmoors and Three-Legged Cross. I sort of listening to the applicant and reading what the parish said. I was trying to get a feel myself for what's around it, and I think on one of the previous photographs, there was to the left of the applicant, there was another property where the roof has already been raised into an area which could be used for viewing anyway. So I think it was the bottom left. I think there's a bungalow with some extension in the roof. Perhaps it's to the right. I don't know. You see it on the. There is one there. You can see it on the.
Would you like me to clarify? Yeah. So this is the application property here. I don't know if you can see my mouse right, but it's coming in that. Number 12 is on the opposite side of the road. It's been redeveloped there.
Yeah.
The house to the two up from the 11A, there is a property which has got the small ones.
Yeah. So I'm mindful in discussion. I'm mindful that for the person living next door, then I can imagine that would feel quite overbearing. However, as I think you said, the street scene is changing. The type of developments we're seeing are changing, and people want to make the most of their property and whatever view might become of that property. And I think the officers work quite hard to reduce the impact as much as they can. So I think that I'm mindful to support the recommendation.
Is that a proposal to take the recommendation as a proposal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll listen to others first.
Thank you. Is there anybody else to make a comment? Does anybody wish to make a proposal? Surrey House.
So I'm Councillor Surrey House, Court Ward. I'm happy to propose the officer's recommendation for approval with conditions.
And do we have a seconder? Is that your hand raised, Councillor Morgan? Okay. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
You're seconding it. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move to the vote unless anyone's got anything to say. No, so let's move to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal, which is we grant planning permission subject to conditions set out in section 18 of the report. One, two, three, four, 5, 6. I make that in favour. All those against? 2, 3, 4 against. And any abstentions? I make that 6 in favour, 4 against. In which case, PHOU 2023-06781 is approved and planning permission is granted. Thank you. And there will be a slight hiatus while we move on to the last item this morning, or the last item on the agenda this morning, which is item.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I have to leave now. So dental appointment.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Azad, and thank you for contribution this morning. We've got PHOU 2024/00735. Hawthorne, 5 The Green, Bloxworth, Wareham. You see the proposal on the screen. So if we're ready, if we wait until Councillor Azad is to this move.
At one, yeah.
Right. Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Chair. So this third application is lies in Bloxworth, east of Bere region. The dwelling is one of 6 cottages, slightly dark, but hopefully you can see it, that make up the Green, which is a development granted permission in 2003, with properties facing onto this green area to the north that's maintained as open space. Bloxworth is a settlement without a boundary in the local plan. I've identified here listed buildings and tree preservation orders, but none are affected by the proposal. There's no landscape designation. Here we see number 5 in its context. The dwellings have an attractive cottage character. Objections to the proposal before you have been raised by Bloxworth Parish, by the Bloxworth Estate, and a neighbour concerned that the proposals depart from the spirit of the original development, contribute to ongoing parking problems, and would have impacts on drainage. All comments were received in support of the proposals, anticipating no changing to parking arrangements and improved drainage. So the proposal is to expand and convert the existing garage building to provide ancillary living accommodation. Permitted development rights, were removed for changes to the dwellings, including garage conversions, boundary treatments, and hard surfacing when the estate was granted, and this was in the interest of local amenity. In addition to the changes to the garage, permissions also sought for the proposed patio extension to the rear here, hard surfacing to the front garden, and amendments to the canopy on the rear of the property, which involves moving one of the windows. The proposed plans are actually sort of 2 separate plans, but I've tried to position them here to give you a rough idea of the outline on the site. The planning permission has previously been granted for conversion of the garage, and this could still be implemented as an alternative to the proposal that's before you today. So I've shown the existing garage, the extant approval, and what is now proposed next to each other. The proposed external alterations are not considered to appear incongruous within their context. You can see that the hipped gable for the existing roof would be reorientated. So this, with this gable end would face the green. That's sort of similar to the way that the side elevation of the garage at number 4 faces onto the green. The wood cladding proposed for this front elevation is similar to the current garage doors that you can see here, dark, and the enlarged structure would be about 0.3 metres higher in terms of its ridge than the existing, and 0.1 higher than the extant. So to the rear, the garage extension has been reworked from the extant scheme with a slightly more modest projection. Yeah. And it's probably easier to see on these side elevations. So this is on the east side facing the boundary with the boundary fence maintained in this proposal. And this is internal facing into the garden. So this is the arrangement that's currently within the plot. And then this is what you see from the access leading up to the property frontage with the fence providing screening. The front garden of the dwelling is currently demarcated by post and rail fencing, which hasn't been the subject of a planning application. It's laid out with some soft landscaping, and it's proposed to replace this with resin bonded gravel. And I think I've got a picture of the colour there. Officers consider that the modest front gardens make a limited contribution to the character of the area. I'm just going to go back to next. Because the character is primarily the product of the cottage style, predominantly thatch buildings, and they're setting around the green. So on balance, the additional hard surfacing can be accommodated and integrated into the street scene. Overall, it's judged that the proposals accord with design policy E12. As you can see, there was evidence of some pooling of water when the case officer visited the site. Resin bonded gravel is permeable, but an aqua drain is proposed to the east edge of the new hard surfacing to assist in directing any additional runoff away from neighbours and into new surface water drainage that will serve the extended garage. Now, particularly concerned objectives is the impact of the loss of garaging on parking availability. The proposal would remove the opportunity to park in the garage, leaving the occupiers reliant on parking in front of the garage, which is understood to be the subject of a covenant to ensure that parking at number 6 can be accessed. So you see here, this is the original plan with the garage at number 6 and the garage at number 5 sharing the access. The covenant would leave only one viable parking space of a size that meets the council's parking guidance, which is 5 metres by 2.4 in front of the west garage door. This one here. Where a 3 or 4 bedroom dwelling has only one off-street parking space, then the Dorset guidance identifies the need for an unallocated parking space and a visitor space, which are not available in this case. The access roads serving the properties are too narrow for on-street parking to be achieved. The Dorset Council's highway team don't have any objection on highway safety grounds, but the proposal is contrary to policy I2 of the Purbeck Local Plan, which requires adequate parking to be provided. Notwithstanding the concerns about amenity, officers are mindful that the ex-stamp permission already exists for the conversion of the garage. This was granted back in December 2021. The limitations imposed by a covenant preventing lawful use of the second parking space were acknowledged, but officers envisaged that tandem parking in front of the western space could be achieved and judged that refusal against Purbeck Local Plan policy IAT could not be justified. Officers now recognise that tandem parking for 2 vehicles is unlikely to be achieved without encroaching onto the swept path used by the occupiers of number 6. On this basis, the report before you acknowledges that the proposals would have the effect of reducing opportunities for parking for number 5 to a single space, and this is less than the guidance recommends. The parking provision doesn't accord with policy I2. However, notwithstanding the policy position, having regard to the fallback provided by the ex-stamp permission, which can still be implemented, officers are unable to recommend refusal on the grounds of loss of immunity from insufficient parking provision. Subject to condition to secure noise assessment prior to the installation of the air conditioning unit that's proposed on the side of the extension to the rear of the garage, no harmful impacts on neighbouring immunity have been identified. So for these reasons, your officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions set out in paragraph 18 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a number of speakers for this one. If we go in the order of public actions, followed by public support, followed by applicant agent, we have 3 minutes each. And the public objection is from Robert Heaton. Three minutes from when you start speaking.
Good morning, committee. My name is Robert Heaton, and I'm the owner of number 6 The Green. My wife and I are the victims of a former 2021 delegated planning decision that is only 3.5 months away from lapsing. The good new work by planning officers on this revised application is extensive and reveals that they would not dream of approving this if it was a fresh application. The application is fundamentally flawed, and this is now a matter of public record. But the remaining time period is being used as a lever to ask you to rule on a difficult question. Can Dorset Council safely approve the turning of a 4-bedroom house with 3 protected parking spaces into a 5-bedroom house with only 1 parking space? This is really serious when you live at the end of a shared narrow track. A 5-bedroom house with only 1 parking space is very wrong indeed. I'm not sure it is even fair to ask you to perpetuate the failings of such a dangerously flawed application. No solicitor would let a purchaser ever buy our house with such a dysfunctional access to the property. Equally, no solicitor would want a purchaser to buy number 5 with 1 parking space. It hurts both the owners that share the narrow track. Approving this deeply substandard design renders my house and the applicant's house unworkable and unsaleable, and does not come close to meeting the very basic standards that Dorset Council are responsible for imposing. In order to solve years of problems, a decisive message needs to be sent to the applicant to add 2 parking spaces next to the entrance to the site. It would add tens of thousands of pounds to the value of number 5 by making a very small alteration to some fence panels. The fence next to the entrance can be slightly inset to give 2 spaces. The old panels are already leaning over and held up by straps. The original owners extended the 2003 garage to give spacious internal parking for large vehicles and made use of their 3 spaces. It was a good improvement and very functional arrangement that minimised the sight of cars from a delightful rural cottage view. This is what the experienced Purbeck Town Council planning officer from Purbeck worked hard to achieve in 2003 when the green was first designed. He went further. He put a main condition on the approval certificate that the garages must not be converted. He explained to me the importance of why he added the condition, and he was obviously right and forward thinking. The existed banning condition 2 says, or the conversion of any garage to habitable accommodation shall be carried out. The new owners are refused to use their garage from day 1 and refuse to abide by the terms of their deeds. But who in the real world wants to serve an injunction on their neighbour? This new planning report to you is perfectly correct in identifying that 1 remaining parking space is not acceptable. It not only makes manoeuvring very difficult, it traps service vehicles and it constricts our access to our garage. We do not object to the building at the back and would ask you to approve the application once it meets safe Dorset parking standards. We've been very consistent in asking this right from 2001. Creating 2 spaces within the curtilage of their dwelling next to the entrance to the green solves all the issues and allows minimum standards to be met.
Thank you very much.
It's absolutely crucial we just say the last few words, if that's all right, please, in this case, because it's so serious.
Last few words.
Thank you. Without sufficient parking, the owners would inevitably have to return to planning if they wanted to sell the house. We don't have that luxury. Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request that this application is refused or approved with a further condition saying 2 additional parking spaces must be added within the curtilage of 5 the Green in close proximity to the entrance of the site prior to work commencing. Thank you for hearing my deep concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Public in Support, Paul Vincent.
Morning, thank you for listening to me. I would like to say that I have lived on the Green at number 3 for 19.5 years. We moved in when they were first built. It's a beautiful place and people are very helpful towards one another. As far as the parking issue is concerned, none of us can put our cars in the garage as originally planned because they're all undersized as per planning regs. They are too small to put a car in. The dimensions do not meet the 3.5 metre by 6 metre recommendation. So therefore, we all park cars outside of our garages. Every house has at least 2, some have 3, some have 4. So I don't really see that it alters the view whatsoever. As far as number 5 is concerned, they have removed part of the fence to park closer to their house. They've downsized the Tiguan to a micro VW up, so put the 2 cars together, they cover 1.5 garage doors. So they have actually increased the parking. The front garden is a disaster. Everything that they try to grow dies because it is constantly flooded every time because of the rainfall. So by putting the gravel in front will actually improve the situation. Our view is not restricted in any way, shape or form. And since I have lived there, then there have been 3 garages built, a set of gates built in 2 other properties on the green or adjacent to it. And as far as I am concerned, there are at least 5 proposals for, again, as opposed to 2 against. Finally, I would like to clarify that the objection on behalf of the parish should be treated as invalid and is a personal objection only. There has been no discussion, vote, objection at any parish meeting whatsoever. My neighbour, Mrs. Taylor, who has also supported his application, actually took the minutes of the last meeting. So therefore, that does not represent the views of the parish in any way, shape or form. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final speaker on this is the applicant stroke agent, Will Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm the agent for the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Baker. The application in question pertains to a small addition to an existing property. There is already a pre-existing permission in place and the currently proposed extension and alterations are smaller than that which was already approved. From what I've been told, the application has only come to committee due to an objection by the parish. However, as Mr. Vince has raised, it's my understanding that the parish did not actually object. Bloxworth has no parish council and only holds a parish village meeting. Mrs. Ackland, the chairman of the parish village meeting, submitted comments to the local authority, and these have been taken as the parish objecting. The application was only briefly raised in the meeting with no comments. In terms of Mrs. Ackland's objection, she's alluded to the removal of the front garden and turning this into a parking space. That is not the case. The front garden is being resurfaced with a permeable material to reduce mud and will still be used as a front garden. This will also not affect the surface water drainage due to the echo drain and the permeable nature of the material, and Wessex Water have no objections. And her mention of departing of the spirit of development is not a planning matter. The parking situation has been proven to be acceptable and will effectively be no different than how it is currently. Mr. Heaton, neighbour at St. Bridget, has objected mainly on the grounds of parking. The applicants have always been able to always parked on their driveway in front of their garages, and he is always able to freely access his own garage and property without having to ask them to move. The issue was also resolved as part of the previous application that has consent. Dorset Highways have no objection to the proposals. The determination by the planning officer in respect of our previous application concluded as the existing garage is 5.3 metres in depth and 2.3 metres wide, it may be able to accommodate a vehicle, but does not meet the current size standards provided by Dorset Highways, and so cannot be considered a usable space. So technically, this would not be considered a loss of parking anyway. Simon Vedette, the planning officer for this application, has recommended that this application be approved and that the principles of the development are acceptable. The conditions recommended by him will serve to answer any other possible queries. The reason is there is no reason as to why this previous consent cannot proceed, which Mr. Vedette has stated, and the proposed extension is smaller than that was previously approved, so any perceived harm would naturally appear reduced. The majority of the proposal is in the applicant's private back garden, which is surrounded by a high fence and therefore not visible. In light of the points I raised, there seems to be no reason for the committee to refuse the application. I trust the application will be approved, and my thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from officers following those? No. So anyone from committee for questions? I believe Councillor Skeets, you indicated.
Sorry.
Yeah. Did you?
Andy Skeets, Westmoors and Three-Legged Cross. I've got a question on the data from the parish meeting. It does state item 3, Bloxworth parish meeting, So that sort of suggests that actually there was a meeting. Can we have some reassurance on that? The officer, please.
Sure, the officers are responsible for parish council meetings or even parish meetings, but please, yes.
Through you, Chair, the comments were submitted to the council as from Bloxworth Parish meeting that they are consultee in the light of the allegations raised about whether it was or was not considered at the parish meeting. The case officer made inquiries with the person who submitted the details, and they confirmed that they were on behalf of the parish meeting. So that's why they've been presented to you as they have been.
Yeah. Any further questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Surreyhouse.
Councillor Surreyhouse, Portmullen Ward. Through the chair, I wonder if I could ask the officer, I missed it a bit as you were moving at speed. No problem. The eco drain. You said that was because it was a question at the pre-meet that it was going into a drain from the development. Is that going into a soakaway or is it going into surface water drain? If you'd like to answer that one first, I haven't done that.
We inquired with the developer, and they're yet to determine which source of drainage will be appropriate, because it will rely on the checking the drainage. But the land area, it's interesting that there was mention of flooding, and there is an issue of pooling. There's no record in terms of anything the council has in the strategic flood risk assessment of flood risk on this site, but it looks to officers like the topology means that water is coming off the green and stuff. So the AquaDrain, we spoke to the flood risk management team, and they suggested that an AquaDrain would just allow any flow of water to be directed into the drainage that's associated with the dwelling. But I'm sorry, I can't give you the specifics.
Thank you. And my second point is the location of the air conditioning unit and potential noise. And I do appreciate that air conditioning units are inherently quieter than air source heat pumps. But I think at this stage, without understanding what the noise impact might be of the choice of air conditioning unit against background noise, I would like that to be conditioned that should it be above an acceptable rate, that we have some acoustic fencing down that side to mitigate the noise. I have to say, looking at the site, and it's not a matter, it's just a comment, and clearly there's been a lot of angst, and I understand the extant permission, but it does seem unfortunate that the development of this site isn't behind the garage into the garden where there is an actual space for an annex, whatever it is, would then have the potential to increase the size and make the garage a usable garage at very, very little cost, additional cost. And I understand that, having been in construction myself. Sorry, sir, this is not a point that we have a conversation. So that's just a comment that I think it could have been done better. I'm concerned for the noise from the air conditioning unit, depending on what that might be, and that could be mitigated with an acoustic fence. And I was concerned where the water was going from the semi-permeable surface of the resin laid hard surface area.
Will you, Chair?
Yeah, please.
So condition 5 suggests that prior to the installation of any air conditioning unit, there should be a noise assessment and details of ongoing maintenance of the air conditioning unit submitted and approved by Dorset Council. So
the intention is that a noise assessment would just establish what the baseline of background noise level is, because we wouldn't want to put an onerous noise limitation if one was not warranted. So we have left it open. If you were concerned about that condition, we could tweak it to include the words, something about appropriate mitigation measures being secured. So it would be the air conditioning unit that is installed must then accord with the details submitted, including any mitigation measures included in the noise proof. But I anticipate that any noise assessment would include mitigation measures, whether that's acoustic fence or whether none are needed because of the low level noise emitted. Thank you.
Just to answer your question. Anybody else? Question? Or want to start debating?
Question, but I think it's just a comment. I can't say whether or not I support this or not, but I think the committee is in a difficult place. We have an extant permission, which foregoes the car parking at the front. And I think that was quite adequately raised by one of the speakers. If we were starting from fresh, I don't think this would be for us for grant. I think the issue is that we've got the extant permission, and we are where we are. It's unpalatable, but we're in a difficult place.
Thank you, Councillor. As always, we are faced with the application that is in front of us rather than the application we'd like to see. And we have to treat the application on its merits. There are requirements in the local plan for good design. Question around whether this is deemed to be good design or not. But that's, I think, for the committee to think about when it debates this issue. So does anyone wish to make any further comments or ask any questions? Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. I was also concerned that we're working on a back application. Could the officers please explain the alternative? If we grant the grant, if we refuse, what changes may or may not occur?
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, let's have the extant planning commission, which they can implement at any point up to December when it comes out. So they would have that option. They could come back in for an alternative scheme.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Scott Florrick.
Scott Florrick, Corp Mullenworth. Just out of curiosity, if there is no parking except for one spot, where is alternate parking available?
Are you able to?
Yeah, it's very limited. There's like a village hall with a big car park here, but I don't know who that belongs to, or if you have any opportunities to some understanding about using it. There's very modest opportunities to park on the road further up here. Yeah, it's opposite the church, I think. Noticed it.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your questions? Anybody else wish to comment or ask questions? So does anybody have a proposal? Is anybody going to make a proposal or not? Or shall we just go for lunch?
Oh,
no.
That's right. Okay.
Hey.
So, Duncan Terry House, Corfmullen, I'd like to, this is a impossible situation. It's not an ideal destination to end up. I think actually for me, the last comment by Councillor Councillor Florett, Freudian slip, we're not there yet. When I look at developments like this, when I look at developments like Stowborough Meadow, and very created design codes, they should be sustainable within themselves. That's part of what you're buying into when you come into a community like that, and parking 100 yards down the road actually detracts from that at all. These should be communities that can live with themselves, with each other, and be sustainable. And I think the proposal, mindful of the accident permission, the proposal goes against that. And so this is not something I can support. So I recommend refusal.
So can I clarify, is that a proposal to refuse?
It is.
And can you enumerate particular grounds with planning considerations for that refusal?
Well, I'm sure the officer can help with that, but I was very clear, I think, in my reasons why I would refuse is because of inadequate parking. It's going to change the character of the development, and people are having to park 100 yards down the road, and it's not good design. So that's where I'm sitting on that one.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brand, you're seconding?
Like Councillor House, I am concerned about this area. I could imagine, though I'm sure all the residents will say, oh, no, we wouldn't, that eventually that green would be taken over informally for parking, and that would even more detract from the area. It is a bit of a bottleneck, this place. Then there's very narrow road in and out. Now, up till now, the residents have been able to manage, and I suggest they just keep managing. I don't want to sort of change the situation as it is at the moment. We just wait and see. So I would second the proposal to refuse.
Thank you. Does somebody wants to come back?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to clarify which policy we were working on. Is it policy I2, which is the parking, or E12, which is design, or both?
Both. Design is one thing.
So we have a proposal. We have a seconder. We have reasons for the proposal, which is to refuse. Does anybody else wish to make any further comments, or? No, in that case, we can move to the vote. So all those in favour of, sorry.
Given
Okay, we'll take 2 minutes. We'll take 4 minutes. Just so that officers can agree a form of words to go along with the reasons that we've given refusal. Bear with us for a moment.
Make a mistake. Certainly having the Swanage areas. So the evidence is there for anyone to see. In the day. Charles. Yes. I didn't have any.
Go live again, please.
Members.
Yeah, everybody. We've had a proposal that has been seconded to reject this application, to refuse this application. The grounds for refusal are on the screen at the moment. So the proposed development provides inadequate parking as required by policy I2 or the Purbeck Local Plan 2018-34, which was adopted very recently. The proposal would increase pressure for parking elsewhere within the settlement and does not represent good design contrary to policy E12 of the Purbeck Local Plan and chapter 12, in particular paragraph 130 of the National Planning Policy Framework. So, ready to vote. All those in favour? Folks are there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Question on this, please.
Please.
Now that I've seen the wording.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Bearing in mind we've got the extent permission, if the committee does vote to refuse this and the applicant goes to appeal, what is the risk of costs against the authority?
I think I'll defer that to Lee.
There's always a risk of cost against the authority an appeal where there's an extant permission. The issue of fallback is the fallback is a material consideration. So the existence of a fallback isn't necessarily a guarantee that the scheme that you refuse now would be approved at an appeal. The question is how likely, or whether there's a substantial possibility that fallback would come to fruition if the development was refused. That's the issue that an inspector on appeal would be looking at when they're assessing whether your decision to refuse would be reasonable in cost terms. So is there a real possibility of the extant permission coming forward and being developed, then that would be a viable fallback. If there isn't a real possibility, then it carries less weight in the balance. And there are factors that may be taken into account when considering whether it's a realistic prospect of coming forward. One of those may be whether or not it's come forward so far.
Mr. Crowther. Councillor Flower.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Flower, bear with me. What I see on the screen, I'm grateful to the officers for drafting that, and it was sensible to wait a few minutes for that to be done. I see material planning considerations there in line with policy, and it's one of the principles of good decision making on a planning committee. You use policy as a basis, and I think we've done that in this case, and I'm more than happy to support it as it's set out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flowers. Any further comments, questions before we move to the vote on the proposal that's before us, which is to refuse permission with the reasons that are on the screen? No further comments. So all those in favour of refusal, please raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Unanimous. Okay, so that application. PHOU 2024-00735 5 Green Blocksworth has been refused. Thank you. Are there any urgent items? No urgent items, and there was no exempt items. No. So this brings us to the end of the agenda for today. Thank you all for attending, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you.